How are they getting on out there?
They're all right. Yeah, they're all right. I mean, the problem is they had to quarantine for 2 weeks somewhere. So last time they did Bermuda, and they were living it up in Bermuda, like wild fishing and stuff.
It's not exactly fucking quarantine,
not terrible,
is it?
No. But this time Antigua was the best option. So they're there, but their internet's just...
So how? Because obviously Antigua's not US soil.
No, it's not. No, but it's a region that's basically
passage.
So they've got to spend 2 weeks there quarantined, and then they can move on to Vegas after that. So they'll be there. I think they're flying out.
Is it still classed as an internal flight then?
I don't think so. I think they'll be coming in internationally.
Wad sorts all that, doesn't he?
Yeah, Wad and Wad's cousin, who's excellent with travel stuff. They deal with all that kind of stuff now. I stick to what I'm good at, which is not a lot.
I don't know.
Got all the podcasts and stuff going. But I tell you what, we'll start off talking today. We're recording, by the way. Hello, everybody. Welcome to listen. I've been writing a book. I've been working on a book.
Is this the Art of War?
Yeah, Lessons of War. So it was going to be I was going to use the Art of War, but it's already been used by someone, so a bit of a shame, really.
For MMA?
No, I won't rob the title. No, it's like a... So I was going to do it as a video library. I'm doing it as a video library. But then I started writing it up as a book. And it's like, as you've seen, I've got a few martial arts books here. And I've been going through and kind of like trying to figure out how other people are communicating skills and stuff. You said you've got a few martial arts books, haven't you?
Nothing like that collection.
Are there any?
Dan's got one or two bookshelves full. that's some collection, mate. And you've got old books and stuff that are obviously going to be collector's items.
Yeah, I've just had a couple of old ones come through. Look at that one, Success at Boxing.
Wow.
Isn't that lovely? Some of these like 1940s, 1950s books. I'll tell you what's interesting though. If you're going back into the old boxing books, so like if you go back to like 1920s, 1930s, they were writing books for a sport that was relatively as new as MMA. So when you read a boxing book from the 1930s, they're talking to you like they're telling you about what the sport is. If you buy a boxing book from today, so much of it's assumed. Like they don't talk about the intricacies of this is the stance and this is how you use the stance and this is how people's stances differ and fist position and punching technique can differ. And so a lot of these older books, and the other thing as well, I think, is because the time between people fighting bare knuckle and people using gloves was relatively 30 or 40 years, I would say, from the Queensberry rules. Mm-hmm. A lot of their punching technique is far more MMA suitable because they weren't punching with the aid of wraps and gloves and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's interesting. Have you got any books that stood out to you when you were coming through martial arts? Did you get into any like Bruce Lee's books or anything like that?
No, that wasn't really my thing. You know, I wasn't really into that. Obviously, I started collecting a few books when I got back into martial arts. So, you know, funnily enough, we're just talking about it off camera, when just before turn of the millennium, when started back with traditional jiu-jitsu. So I started collecting some books then. And, you know, stupidly, I think I had more than what I do now, but I think I'm going to blame the missus. I think some of them have been shipped off the car boots.
Oh no!
Shall we say?
Really?
Yeah, but I've got some of the early MMA instructionals when I remember a very famous one. You'll remember it. I don't know if you've got it. You probably have. Is Bass Rutten's Big Books of Combat.
Yeah, Big Book of Combat.
Remember them?
I do remember
and it. Was two. I think there was 2 volumes.
Yeah.
I've still got those because I think they should be collectible.
I bet they are. I have probably got them. If they're not on the shelf, they'll be somewhere.
And obviously, you know, back in the days, this was before DVDs.
Yeah.
You know, this is when we were still watching MMA and UFCs on VHS video.
I've got some of them as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking how much can be learned from like the amount of stuff, because I read the Tower Jeet Kune Do like once every couple of years, and I go like I've got notes in it, and I kind of go over my notes and see where my opinions have changed, and I think to myself like, at 32 years old with only books and a limited amount of actual live combat to see and a bit of boxing, like that was his understanding of martial arts, but like we've got thousands of hours of fights that we could watch, thousands of hours of jiu-jitsu and thousands of hours of grappling and boxing and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of... have you seen it kind of filter out to a point where like the core techniques have risen to the top? Off camera, we were just having a few conversations off camera with Veronica as well, talking about like the fundamental understandings as opposed to technical understandings. Can you think of a time when you like kind of turned that corner and you started going from having a technical understanding of jiu-jitsu to going, oh, I understand what I need to do in this situation? Yeah,
it was almost like the analogy. And obviously, look, these are everybody's books, and resource. You know, like you said, it's not so much. You've got years worth of material. I mean, years as in, you know, from video perspective, you know, with YouTube and Fight Pass and instructionals and everything online. It's just, it's never ending. But yeah, talking about, I was using the analogy of, even if you kind of relate it maybe to MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that when you first start, especially when you go to, you know, classes and it's a big class and you've got different levels in there, it's almost like you're like a kid in a sweet shop or a kid in a toy shop. Poof, you boot the doors open and everything's in front of you and you're like, you don't know which one to focus on and you're like left and right. Oh, look, there's something shiny or there's something new. And I was kind of, I think everybody goes through that phase, you know, that you think it's about amassing as much technique and knowledge as you can. And without, you know, being too cliche and all that kind of thing, you know, the thing about, you know, fear not the man who's studied one technique or 1,000 techniques once, is that? And I think those kind of things, it's all about repetition and drilling. And then obviously as you get older and you progress through the belts and stuff like that, you know, I think obviously your knowledge base becomes deeper and greater, but I think your understanding and the rigidity, if you like, the concrete of the fundamentals becomes more important. You know, like if I'm rolling now, there's things I'll do now, you know, depending on what your game is and your style is, you'll have like go-tos and fundamentals. I think just you'll have a lot more at your disposal, but you tend to pick out what you know works for you. But then when we were talking about concepts, that's an interesting one. You know, it's kind of like a buzzword at the moment. Not saying that it's just been invented recently, but I think if you it forces you to look at techniques in a different way. You know, mechanics is another buzzword, isn't it? You know, you try and explain to people, I was saying to Veronica, but you've got to be mindful of your audience. I think if you're teaching a jiu-jitsu class and you've got a beginner's class full of white belts, if you're teaching an armbar from closed guard, you have to keep the steps small. You know, it's kind of pragmatic, ABC. If you go too down the rabbit hole or too far into the mechanics, but you know, other people will argue and say, well, no, actually, that's the way to do it. At that point, I
suppose that's different learning capacities of the people in the class as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because like some people, like I would much rather, and I think Veronica's the same, like much rather have the information so we can apply it ourselves with the logic that we get from that. And other people, if you give them too much of that, then you know, I wonder how much of your game when you're grappling now is like subconscious. Like when I was teaching a few months ago when the gyms were open, and I was teaching a couple of things, and Jimmy pointed out something that I didn't notice I was doing, because I'm not speaking out loud about the techniques I'm doing now, and I've started to do it a bit more now. I've been writing this book, but like I was adding a little step in that was automatic for me as a way of counteracting my being off balance, and that was a subconscious adaptation that I'd got. How, like, percentage wise, what would you say? You're like, there must be a lot of your game when you're grappling that is like that kinesthetic feel that you just know that needs more pressure, that needs less pressure.
About 100. About 100%. Yeah, I think it's going back to what we were saying was, you know, when you get older, you know, like as the knowledge amasses, things tend to, because obviously I'm quite a bit older than you.
I didn't realise that. I thought we were a very similar age. You look very well for it. 66 he is.
Let's keep them guessing. I know, right there.
Yeah, put in the comments. Oh no, I bet it's on your Wikipedia,
you fuck, aren't you?
I bet it's on your Wikipedia page, isn't it?
I don't have a Wikipedia.
Do you not?
Oh god.
Oh, you must have.
Oh, you can imagine it. Imagine the comments.
Yeah.
I'll be I'll be 47 this year.
Really?
But I think it's, and I'm still on the, I'm still on the mat and still moving. I think there's like, going back to what we're saying about, I'm trying to remember what I do go back to what I'm saying.
We were talking about percentages of games being subconscious.
Yeah, obviously when you get older and stuff like that, that's the way I teach now. When I'm taking a class, I am very much into the concepts and the mechanics, and I can't help but teach, even if I'm at the gym and there's one of the other classes around and stuff like, obviously whoever's teaching, it's their class, but when they kind of break out or people are doing some free sparring, it's like the guys will tell you, like the travelling officials, whenever we go, they love it, because like David Leatherby's a good point, and Ben, because they're like, I'll just get him talking, and then I'll just go blah 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 blah.
You've done a seminar.
Yeah, it's like a free seminar. I'm like, you motherfuckers, you're getting all the but I can't help it.
You enjoy teaching though.
I love teaching.
Yeah,
I absolutely adore teaching.
Do you in any way try and be the coach that you felt like you needed when you were coming up? Because that's so in yeah, okay.
That's deep, Dan.
I know it is.
Because I remember
I'm in a bit of a deep place at the moment, as you can probably tell.
I remember that about it was a couple of years ago, and it was a meme that I'd put up, and it was just that, and it's mad that is, because the meme was, be the person you needed when you were younger.
Is that right? Yeah.
And it like set me off, and as a parent and stuff like that, it's easier said than done, believe me, as a parent. Trust me on that, folks. You have to take my word on that. Being a parent's magical. Yeah. But it's not easy, That's like concept driven as well. Yeah. It's not easy. But that's bizarre, that is, because I'll never forget that kind of thing. And yeah, like I've had some great teachers, where it talks of jiu-jitsu, for instance, there's a perfect example. Last week I was doing a talk with Braulio Estima. And obviously people who, if you follow jiu-jitsu, Braulio will not need an introduction. No. Maybe if these new youngsters, maybe they, if they're entirely no-gi and stuff, and if they're very young, they may not know. But anybody in jiu-jitsu will know Braulio is one of the greats, phenomenal. Yeah. And we were blessed in this country because... Well,
if you don't know, there's your afternoon. After you've watched the podcast, you can go and watch some Braulio competition.
Braulio Estima. And I'll tell, you know me, I'll tell every man and his dog and everyone who will listen. Excuse me, because in this country, in the UK, when Braulio first came over, I was talking about this right about 03. So I'm basing my jiu-jitsu on Braulio Estima. People in London were basing their jiu-jitsu on Hodja Gracie. We had two of the all-time greats of jiu-jitsu who've won everything, Mundials and ADCCs and Absolutes and Super and everything, we were blessed, and we were very fortunate that that's my measure of jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And I'm very,
Were there enough people around to train with?
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? This is what people can't understand. And I'll use Braulio as the example. When Braulio first came to England from, it was Roger's dad, Mauricio Gomez, who brought him over. Mauricio set up in the custard factory in Birmingham. Then he moved, and he was responsible for bringing over, obviously, his son and Braulio. And when Braulio first came to the UK, he was a brown belt. Right. He wasn't a black belt. Very shortly thereafter, then when he disappeared back to Brazil, and then he got his black belt from Master Carlos Gracie Jr. He got his black belt from him.
And you got your black belt from Braulio?
I did, yes.
That's a good lineage, isn't it?
It's, I was saying that the other day.
If you're picking a lineage, that's
phenomenal. Yeah. Listen, there's some absolute amazing lineages out there. There's some phenomenal teachers and phenomenal, but I'm very proud of it, because listen, anybody gets a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt and they put their time in, and no matter who it's from, full respect and what do you call it to you, But yeah, when people ask, I'm very proud of the fact that, there's only a few steps under, and, that I'm a black belt under Braulio Estima. I think it means something. Mm-hmm. People may say the same thing if they're a black belt under Hodger or Marcelo Garcia, or, I class them as one of the greats. But, so getting it from Braulio actually meant something. But I was going back to the fact that when Braulio first came to the UK, he was a brown belt. Obviously, technically, he was doing all these things. We was laughing about it. It's like this wizardry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like his stature and his body type's always been the same. Big, crazy, because that's his nickname,
legs
isn't
are
it?
Ridiculous. What?
His Brazilian nickname's Carcara.
Right.
And it's a bird in Brazil.
Oh, is it?
It's like a stork type bird. Because obviously his legs were, like Brillian nicknames. Once they're there,
Shoe face. That's the worst. It's got to be the worst. Whoever
crazy.
gave him that nickname.
I'm sinking into this chair. What is it with us and that? We was
real T-Rex skin as well. That is.
It's what?
It's real T-Rex skin as well.
I could feel it morphing into me. I'll get to the point. So Braulio first came over. This technical savagery and this wizardry.
Yeah.
And doing all crazy things from, all manner of stuff, and helicopter armbarring
that
people,
was the one.
Laughing as you're halfway over, all of that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But then Braulio started training as an athlete. When he first came over, he was a jiu-jitsu guy.
Right.
But me and Braulio were training partners in the gym too. Stevie B's where we were.
Yeah.
He was the guy who, me and Braulio were doing a lot of strength training together. Then Braulio became the athlete.
Right.
So he was like a technical wizard before, then started training all round as an athlete.
Was he a good athlete as well?
Who, Braulio?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because he's just, he just took to it,
Yeah.
And we were always, it was great because we were always trying to outdo each other in reps and strength and stuff like that. So all the good things were there.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is then Braulio went on to have his most successful stint ever when he became, he's a multiple-time black belt Mundials world champion, which is obviously the World Cup of Jiu-Jitsu, ADCC champion, absolute champion. The accolades are there. That's why I call him one of the greats. But he done that in the UK. Mm. Braulio didn't have. Okay, he had Roger, and he had his students. Yeah. It wasn't a bit till
when
later
did Victor come over?
Well, when Victor came over to the UK, that was even funnier because Victor was a very young. I can't even remember how old he was. Victor was a purple belt, same kind of thing.
He's a great athlete as well.
Yeah, the pair of them are very young kid. Hardly spoke a word of English, so we learnt everything on the ground over here with a load of Brummies. That was the funniest part. But when Victor came over, he was the same, trained technically as a jiu-jitsu guy, but no athletic training or strength training. But this is the thing I was explaining. I remember saying it to Joe Rogan at UFC 89 in Birmingham, and he's standing looking at Braulio. I'm like, yeah, that's him. And he's like, man, he just like, you look at Braulio because he's not a big, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
Stature like frame wise, but you're looking at his body type and he's
like Avatar. He's like Avatar. He is.
His guard,
he's got such long arms and legs.
Long arms, and that's what he used to amazing effect.
Yeah.
His guard was deadly. He was the best guard in the world at one point. That was his thing. Mm. And anyway, so what I'm saying is getting to this point, sorry. Imagine the comments. Getting to the point, like, he wasn't training in Brazil or America with 20, 30 other black belts. There was only a couple of black belts in the UK at the top. It was a bit later. Legato came over. Legato came over to the UK quite early, but nowhere near as early as Braulio. And then when Victor came over and teamed back up with Braulio, his ascendancy and his ride was very fast, And then Victor went on to be, world class and phenomenal too. But he had us, his students, and obviously we used to get him tired and, there's things you would compensate for.
Yeah.
And Braulio and Hodger would obviously travel back and forth to each other, but the pool of talent they had to rely on was ultra small, and yet he, kind of testament to him, he still went on to become a multiple-time world champion. And obviously Roger's legacy's cast in stone as well. I think it's an interesting point.
And they're good sizes for you to train with as well, aren't they? I mean, they're
Hodges,
both big guys.
Hodges is massive.
What is he, 6'5"?
Yeah, he's a couple of inches taller than me. I'd say 6'4" easy.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember one time training with Roger, and there was MMA. He was doing a little bit of MMA, just moving around in his gym. And it was, obviously I like from wrestling too.
Yeah. And you'd had some fights by this point.
Oh yeah,
MMA
this was
fights.
yeah. And obviously Hodger too. But this the one time, and then I'm like, the wrestling thing, I've got the upper hand here. So I'm like, boom, clinch, take him down, and then I'm like, I'm fucking sat in Roger Gracie. I'm like, what did you do that for? And then before you know it, he was just like, boom, I'd been swept, and he's in side control, and then working on a Kathagatami.
Yeah,
it's the same with Braulio, but not doing ourselves a disservice. That's what we were used to. And Braulio was saying that the other day. I remember doing in fact, I posted it. It was footage from, I think it was 16 years ago, Urban Guerrillas. A really good day. And I'd done well that day. And there was black belts, and Braulio was always like, what are you worried about? He was always saying about, because that was our marker. I had him to compare to. So when I was traveling and people, this guy's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and I'm like, fucking hell, must be good. And of course there was good people, but there's good.
And then there's Braulio.
There was Braulio, and, you know what I mean? That was the marker.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
And just, like I said, but being, and don't forget, mate, I mean, when I left Stevie B's to do my own thing, and then I didn't put a gear, I had an 8-year hiatus. I didn't stop training, but I didn't put a kimono on for 8 years. And I remember the first time I went back to train at Braulio, we were always in contact. The first time I went back to train at Braulio's, and I walked on the mat, and then I had a blue belt on, and it was like, what the fuck? What are you doing? But it was like, that's the way that it wasn't until I put the kimono back on, and then you go through the ranks. And I was always training and still wrestling, and I was teaching submission grappling. I wasn't calling it BJJ.
So you had your black belt, but you put a blue belt on because you'd not been in a gi for
No, didn't, because I took the gi off. The last time I'd left the gi, I was
a blue belt.
I was a blue, because even back then, obviously I was MMA and no gi.
Yeah. So
the way that it's done, and the way that it's done properly, is for you to have ascendancy through the belts.
Yeah.
You need to train in the gi, and rightly so. It's the way that it's done.
Yeah, I'd put a blue belt on if I went back into a gi class now.
Yeah, it's the way to do it, because it's a
and I do want
thing.
to go through the grades at some point, but I've been so focused on no gi stuff, and there is a difference to me. There is, I think there's a, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the technical and the fundamental understanding. Like, you need a more mechanical understanding of somebody with no gi, because the handles vary from one person to another.
Well, there's more.
Yeah, and you have to find the handles, and they're much smaller grips, like climbing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, gi grips are big handles that you can hook your whole hand on, whereas
depending on who you're rolling with.
That's very true. That's very true.
Some handles are bigger than others.
Did you get any like was there like a systematic approach from, like, with Braulio and with Hodger Gracie? Did they have like a systematic approach to a match, like their preferential positions, and did they pass that down to you, or was it much more their own game that they worked?
Well, obviously, like I said, with my training, it was almost exclusively with Braulio, not Roger.
Okay.
But we had access to Roger, and obviously being down there, but it's Braulio, But I didn't learn like Braulio. Braulio was known. He was a guard player, because his guard was fucking deadly. It was his thing, and obviously, and he'd done it in both. This is the thing. He's not just Braulio didn't win the worlds in gi. He then done it and repeated it in ADCC. Same as Roger. Look at that. Kind of proves that adage. I think things go around in cycles too. And evolution counts for a lot, right? It's no surprise that, okay, you'd get the odd anomaly, like a Jeff Monson or a Marc Kerr, but in ADCC of old, almost exclusively, everybody who took off the kimono would win. ADCC, Pedapano, Roger, Marcelo Garcia, Jacare, Damien Maya, the list goes on, Braulio, all of those people who had exclusively been gi athletes, when you take the gi off, they could translate it to to MMA. Translate it to no-gi grappling very well. Obviously, like I said, you'd get the odd anomaly. People who were like Monson and Marc Kerr, but they got submission savvy through MMA.
Yeah.
They didn't get submission savvy through, because if they'd have just walked in from wrestling, they all would have been submitted.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I told the story before about Jeff Monson, didn't I? When he first came over to the UK, because I'd competed against Jeff twice. I'd lost both times in the final, but he was, he's
a monster.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Talking about handles.
Yeah.
It's fucking.
Yeah.
But he came to train with us in Birmingham because he knew Braulio was there, and he came to train with us. And there was me, him, Braulio, and I think Barry Foley was there. So there was 4 of us in the room.
Yeah.
He doesn't know Braulio at this point, but he knows Braulio's obviously going to be good training. He's jiu-jitsu black belt. So everybody goes home. We have the closed door training. So Braulio's there. He meets Jeff for the first time. We're talking, but we're rolling. Braulio at this point had never been to ADCC. That shows how early this is. They start training. Braulio triangles Jeff 3 times like that right off the bat. Jeff's like, what the fuck? This doesn't happen to me. I said, well, it just did. A couple of times. And he was like, man, because, this is when Jeff he'd already won ADCC. And I think at that point, his nemesis was Marcio Cruz, Pedapano.
Yeah.
And he'd nullified him and done this, that, and the other. So he trained with Braulio, been triangled, submitted a bunch of times. Braulio's just there, like, because that's we'll all sit there thinking, yeah, we fucking know that feeling.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, so 2 things happened which were pivotal Braulio was going to ADCC regardless, because obviously he would be when you get your notoriety and then your invitation, him being a gi world champion, of course it's going to translate. But 2 things happened. Jeff had actually called ADCC himself and said, listen, there's a guy here.
I do really, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy here in Birmingham. I've just trained with him. You got to get him in. And Braulio went there as an alternate the first time, so he'd opened that door for him.
That's very cool.
Second point was there was something back in the day called the 10K ground clash. You remember 10K karate? It was the same guy, Joe. I think Joe Long was instrumental in it too. And there was 10K ground clash, and I was going to compete in it, but I got injured, and then Braulio was in it. I'm like, well, I'm fucking not doing it now. And Braulio had done it. Him and Jeff, opposite ends of the bracket, got to the final. What did Jeff do? So boom, picked Braulio up, boom, down, controlled him, won the match, and won the 10K.
Right.
And then it was fair, because even afterwards, and he said, listen, listen. He was listening, and he said to the crowd, he said, look, I've trained with this guy, and it's only because I've trained with him that I'm walking out of here with the money today. He said, because if I didn't, I wouldn't know how good his game was.
Oh, that's very cool.
And it was really cool. Jeff's a cool guy, man. I seen him I caught up with him in...
Is he still living in Russia?
Living in Russia.
Moved to Russia.
And I was in Uzbekistan.
Right.
And Jeff came over. There was quite a few guests there. Roy Jones, very random.
Right.
It was like
in Uzbekistan with Roy Jones Jr.
And Frank Mir.
Why not? Of course, with
and
Frank
Jeff
Mir.
Monson.
Of course. I got a phone call from Frank Mir from Uzbekistan at one point. I don't remember. That's a whole
Maybe
other story.
It was then.
It may have been, yeah.
Obviously, Habib and his guys were there. They were like, guests of honour too.
Yeah.
And Islam Makachev and all, they were all in one side of it. And then obviously the rowdy Westerners, we were separated because we were
rowdy.
Yeah, and even drinking alcohol with dinner, so they have a separate thing over there. Obviously respecting their wishes, but in that, so you got Habib and all of his guys in one room, and then in our room at our table, it was class, because there was me, Mia, Will Harris was there, who's Anatomy of a Fighter. Will was there doing a documentary, and then Monson came in. I was like, me and Jeff got good history. It was really cool. Yeah. So he is still living in Russia, and I think he's doing a lot with underprivileged kids too, helping. Like, I've seen him do some stuff for hospices and stuff like that. He's got a pretty cool story, Jeff has.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I could see him making a movie about him one day. You know what I mean?
But he was like it was like this table. He
was
like
a monster.
Square block.
Yeah, he was.
But yeah, funny
I
story.
remember fighting on Cage Warriors. I've got a poster in there with.
I refed him.
Yeah.
He fought.
I fought on that same
a
card.
couple of times Tengiz.
Of course.
And he fought
Tengiz was good back in the day. Once he used to
Yeah, he kicked my
manhandle
ass.
people. Did he really? Yeah. Did you
I
fight
fought
Tengiz?
Tengiz. Went into
Monster.
TKO in the second round, but he beat me fair and square. But I wasn't there at all.
No.
But
Would you do it again? Would you like?
of course, man.
If you could
No,
go back.
No. Listen,
What would you change?
What?
What would you change?
Everything. when I went away from, I told this story, didn't I? I'd done the podcast with Daniel Strauss.
Right.
When I was talking about my journey as and look, like I said, I wanted to be the best fighter in the world, but I wasn't the best fighter in the world. But I won more fights than I lost. I've been there since the start, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Apart from everything.
Apart from everything. but when
I'm just going to check that's still recording because I get paranoid now doing it myself. Now the Raptors are away. Yeah, we're still good.
But when I went away, because I remember I'd lost to a big guy called Buzz Berry.
I do.
And it was at Wembley, and it was on Sky Sports, and I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, I was crying all of these things. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Because I just gave up. I didn't want to be there. The mental terrors, I'd be up and down. Then I went away, and I just focused solely on back to wrestling and boxing. I was just immersed in. That's what I was telling the story about with Pele Reed and Chris Cooper and all the guys. And I spent a long time with Spencer McCracken, who's Rob McCracken's, Rob McCracken, who was the Team England, Team GB coach.
Yeah.
Obviously with Joshua too. I spent a long time with his brother.
You ever refereed boxing?
No. Actually, I have.
Yeah.
About like some kickboxing too, but it's not really my thing. It was like in a mixed show. I don't like mixed shows. Okay. And then I went away and fixed everything, and then came back a little bit too the other way, because I came back at a light heavyweight. I was never a heavyweight. I came back and I hadn't lost at that weight. That's where I should have, but I was getting older and all these. But listen, I wouldn't change anything, mate. That I'll die a happy man, because what I knew always had, I found in the fight. It was the fight I had with Ivan Serrati. That was the savagery that I needed to find, because he kicked the shit out of me in the first round. My nose, I mean, look at it. It's not much better now, but he broke my nose again badly in that fight. It was all over the place. But just my journey is obviously, and I had a lot no-gi. I was quite successful. I'd done a lot no-gi grappling too.
What was your most successful path to victory when you were grappling?
Sorry?
What were your most successful paths to victory?
Like, obviously British stuff, but I remember doing like I was talking about.
I mean, technically, how were you winning your matches?
Chokes were my thing. I used to head and arm chokes. I guess that's like a braided, because I got long arms. It's like probably my favourite thing is katagatami, any head and arm variations. But the wrestling side would always stand me in good stead too. Obviously, training for so long with wrestling, and from the MMA side, it would stand me in good stead. And I'd come up against some good international guys too. I remember there was the Urban Gorillas, the one that I was posting the other day, and then they had a later tournament that was like a pre-qualifier for ADCC Europe, for the European trials. And I'd lost in the final that day to a Spanish guy called Roger Laurent. It was kind of weird, because we'd gone through and we got to the final. Everybody's thinking, this guy's the fight's going to win. They're going to go to the trials. And I think he passed my guard, if I remember rightly. I think, I'd lost by guard pass. But I've got Braulio in my corner. He was a Robin Gracie student. Robin was in Barcelona, I think, at the time in Spain. So there's him and Robin, and there's me and Braulio. And man, listen, man, I wouldn't change it for the world. I remember another thing that I'd done was when FILA, which was the World Grappling Games, and I'd done the British trials, won the British trials. I remember there was an absolute fucking monster. I forget his name, a guy from London Shoot.
Right.
And I'd got him in the final, and I'd beat him in the final, won the place.
Was it Mustafa Al-Turk?
No, it wasn't Mus.
Okay.
I know Mus. There was.
Did he fought in the UFC, didn't he?
Yeah. Must a lovely bloke.
Yeah.
He was an.
Did he fight
like
Crow Cop? I'm trying to remember who he
did,
fought.
yeah.
Is that his debut?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's fucking.
Yeah.
I think he had 2 fights. One was Czech Congo.
Yeah.
And Crow Cop. It was a
Yeah.
tough ask.
Horrible
But he was
fights.
like a big gentle giant. Must was a cool
Yeah.
guy. But I remember winning this. Getting through to the final in this tournament, and I'd lost on a guard pass. Sorry, going through that the feeler, and then I'd got injured, so I couldn't represent Great Britain. But I'd gone there as a coach. They were good days.
Yeah.
Done a lot at the British level too, gi and no gi. So, you know.
So what if you walked into your gym now as a student?
Yeah.
What would you, and knowing what your goals were back in the day?
Yeah.
What would you coach? What would your system be? What would you want to equip you with as a fighter, a competitor?
I'm not.
Would you change anything about how your game was back in the day?
Yeah, but it was more than that. Look, like I said, I wasn't a world champion or anything
Yeah.
like that. But like as a big guy and stuff, I was always known to be quite technical. You know what I mean? I don't move like a bigger guy, and I don't move like a 47-year-old man. A few people will testify,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But yeah, look, I had my time, you know, but it all set me up. All of that, being immersed in the sport as a fighter from the mentality point of view, and obviously the intricacies of, you know, from grappling and jiu-jitsu and everything I've done and coaching fighters, it's always served me well for being the referee who I became.
Yeah.
As some will agree, some won't. Keep an eye on the comments.
Are you part of this? Are you going to be doing any work with Bellator with this upcoming Grand Prix they've got? You're not sure?
I have ref for Bellator.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the when Bellator travel, the regulator and I don't really see eye to eye.
Right. Okay.
So in the realms of, and again, it just underlines my professionalism. The person who looks after the regulatory side of it, when they travel outside the US, we don't necessarily see eye to eye for,
Yeah.
and that's it is
Simple
what it
as
is.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on these old guys fighting these the veterans that are?
Listen, man. Look, who are we to? You know, it's funny because in the
Did you watch Tyson Jones?
I didn't watch it.
Did you not watch it? No interest. Or would you watch a high level boxing match now?
If it was on and it was
Yeah.
there, I didn't. I saw bits of it, but I wasn't sitting down, you know, intently watching it. But look, who am I to tell these people no? I tell you what I did. What I did enjoy more. Obviously, when I saw it on paper, I was a bit like, you know, you're thinking these things. But in Fight Island, I refereed Shogun and
Shogun
Lil Nog.
against Little Nog. Yeah.
And you know what? I was just so pleased that the fight got to the end and neither of them were finished or
Yeah.
dramatically or emphatically. You know, who are we to tell these people that they can't compete anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you know, in the UFC, when they're passing if they're going through the medical protocols and they're being professionally cleared to fight, who are we to say any different? Look at Mike Tyson being cleared to fight. And I tell you, it was the fact that it was in California as well, because Andy Foster is the regulator for the exec director for California. Very well respected guy, very, you know, been around the sport, understands it, not just MMA, but boxing too. And when you listen to someone like, he made a very good point. You remember the fight with Tito and
Chuck.
Tito and Chuck, and it took place in California, and Andy. A lot of people say no, it shouldn't have because they were concerned about Chuck and this, that, and the other. And he's going, would you not rather it took place in an area where the jurisdiction is heavy, the medical they have to satisfy medical requirements before, during, and after. You know that the referee assigned to it's going to be all of these things. You're like, well, of course. Otherwise, because if it didn't happen, and they'll just go to some backwater venue in the middle of nowhere, even if it was licensed or not, it could have ended up on an Indian reservation land.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, these legends of the sport. Look, obviously when they're matched like that as well, it's not like
that's the other thing, isn't it? It's matching.
You're not matching Mike Tyson versus Anthony Joshua, are you?
Yeah.
Anytime soon. You're matching guys of a similar level and guys who are, got one foot out the door. They want to have closure on their careers. Come on, man. What's not to love about that? They satisfy the medical requirements. The doctors are happy. Why can't we be happy?
Are you, if you see like an older fighter that's taken a lot of wear through their career, do you keep that in mind when you're refereeing, or do you referee completely objectively as if they were anybody?
Well, it's funny there because it's clear that we do not referee fights in the same way, and by that I mean, do you think I'm going to referee 2 first-time amateurs the same as I'm a UFC World Championship fight?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. In terms of leeway and what you'd be prepared to unfold and happen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, at the highest level, if 2 fighters are fighting on the UFC and they are fighting and they've passed all the requirements to get there, it's sanctioned and in jurisdiction, then once those fighters arrive to me in that octagon, it's a fresh canvas. Mm-hmm. I'm there to do my job and protect them. At such a point, what I'm saying is I'm not going to stop the fight early because I go, well, he's 45 years old and that. No, I'm going to stop the fight because I think he's in a place or she's in a place to no longer intelligently defend themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're talking about here, the TKO. Yeah. A submission or a KO writes itself. But once a fighter at that level, if they're past fit and deemed okay to, I can't start taking my own jurisdiction into, going, well, I'm going to err on the side of it. Look, at the end of the day, if a fighter's ability is diminished enough for me to be wary of them continuing in that fight, then that's my job to step in.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. Your clarification with the definitions of a KO and a TKO have always helped me. Like the difference between being unable to defend yourself and not intelligently defending yourself.
Cannot and is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so... obviously, a TKO, what Dan's referring to is obviously the definition, and it's great for me because it's you rang. Dan's doorbell's phenomenal. You'll see, it's like what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like like a pull.
It's mechanical.
Yeah.
It's mechanical, so it's still hardwired to.
I'm analog and not digital.
We're in the East Wing right now. If you're in the West Wing, you can't really hear it. It has a little bell at the side of the bed. What was he saying then?
We were talking about refereeing objectively.
Yeah.
And the definitions between a KO and a TKO.
Oh yeah, so definition. Obviously, a TKO or technical knockout is if the fighter is not intelligently defending themselves. So they're choosing not to satisfy the requirements potentially of the referee. In a knockout situation, it's clearly defined as cannot. And when you think about it, methodically and mechanically, if I am unconscious or separated, of course, I'm not in a position to be able to defend myself. And the same can happen. That's why you can be KO'd to the body too.
Yeah.
When you see the body will shut down. I don't want you to knee or kick me or punch me in the head, but I'm in no fit state or position to be able to do anything about it.
What about? And I'm sure people will assume which fight we're talking about from this. What about if a fighter is just too exhausted to defend themselves? They're still standing, but they just can't get their arms up to defend their head, and they're taking shots.
Again, that's the call of the. I mean, what you said there that's a very definitive thing, because there's a difference between if you said a fighter cannot get their arms up, of course, then what more do you need?
Yeah, but purely from exhaustion, like from just has got nothing left.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, look, a great case in point in that is Kelvin Gastelum Adesanya that we broke down in great detail, and of course. Everything, it was like the perfect storm, because that crescendo of that last 30 seconds was just magnanimous. Is that a good word to use? Yeah, I'm sticking with that.
It was magnificent.
It was magnificent. It was what's magnanimous mean?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Imagine the comments. Goddard, you fucking... Anyway, it was... because, and this is the thing that you're dealing with here, is you do have to sometimes recognise the difference between a hurt fighter or a tired fighter or a combination thereof. But by the definition, obviously, as a referee, even if you are tired and you are exhausted, that will still factor into my reasoning. Because I know you want to be able to stay in that fight. I know you want to be able to summon up everything from within and get out of that bad spot. But if you're unable to, even if you're covered up, but you're so exhausted, I can't just sit there and let that unfold for however long's left. It's kind of like the good case in point I make about this is being able to see the fighter. I try and articulate to a fighter backstage, and I will say to them, you know, I think we spoke about it before in this, and I will explain, look, if you're hurt at any point in the fight, I just need to see you do one thing. I need to see you potentially with your eyes on your opponent, but that's not always feasible. I said, and you're doing something to show me that you still want to stay in the fight. I need two things. Obviously, mechanically, I know that or so to say, cognitively, I know that your brain is still functioning. But more importantly than that, I know you still want to remain in the fight.
Right.
And that's the key detail here. So if you get into a grounded position or a turtle and I can't see you, it's hard for me to read you. If I'm looking at the whites of your eyes and I can see, you know, you're determined, it's an easier read.
Yeah, and a turtle position is already a defeated position anyway, really. In
but it's not that. And then we look at what's leading up to that.
Yeah.
If we just, and then, you know, if we're in a fight and it's 30 seconds old, for instance, if the fight's 30 seconds old, I know you haven't taken a great deal of damage up to that point. That can factor into allow me. But if you get concussively dropped into a bad position and your fight is unloading, I can't sit there and just wait to see what happens. I can't sit there and wait for you know, I'm not going to use the term killer blow. I'm going to use the term, you know, the final blow.
You're not waiting for that finishing shot to be.
You know, you say like we don't need. I say don't use the term, but I've used it before in a training. It's not the kill shot. If a fighter's exhausted, you've heard the term out on his feet.
Yeah,
I don't have to wait.
Like one of your best stoppages ever was Shogun, Anthony Smith.
Yeah.
Look what came today. Look at that. Shogun round 5. How cool's that?
Very cool.
I've got a few action figures down here ready for decorating the other room, the podcast studio. And I ordered a bunch of them. That's cool, isn't it?
The fight you're referring to there was
Anthony Smith,
and he got
it was that last elbow, and it was like
blasted.
Yeah,
and I caught his head.
Yeah, loved it. So let's go in a slightly different direction then. What if a fighter's refusing to engage? At what point would you step in then? Like,
that's
do you remember?
timidity.
Right,
that's classed as timidity.
But you've got no power other than you can deduct a point, I suppose, can you?
Yeah. But that's what were you going to say?
I was just thinking back to. Do you remember Nate Quarry, Caleb Starnes?
Yeah.
Where Quarry was running around like doing this.
He was
just backing up.
He was protesting, wasn't he, for something?
Yeah.
But that's where timidity comes in, because part of timidity, as well as faking injury or intentionally spitting out, if you're trying to avoid the fight or avail yourself or buy yourself more time. I'll tell you a good high-profile instance. If you remember Holly Holm, I'm sure you were commentating in Singapore. Were you commentating?
Yep.
Holly Holm versus Betch Kohea.
Yep.
And
yeah, she was just moving.
And I let it go. And here's the thing. So generally the emphasis is going to be put on the fighter who's on the outside. But what I say, if the fighter's on the inside, if you're circling and then you do circles too, we're going to get more and more circles. But if you cut the angle or move forward, it's easier for a referee to see if that fighter... What I'm saying is, me and you are fighting. You take the outside of the cage and you just keep dancing around and circling. If I stay on the inside and keep doing the same, we're going to get a very disgruntled crowd or a boring match, because I'm emulating and copying what you're doing. But that could be your game plan. But I'll quickly figure out what the game plan is, or if you're avoiding the fight. Because if I move forward to close the distance on you, and you are continually lateral left, lateral right, and avoiding that contact, then there's something for the referee to work with. But when we're both effectively drawing the same shapes, it's kind of hard. That's why in that fight, you'll see I let it play out for like a round and a half, or maybe even 2 rounds. And I said, stop. I said, ladies, look, I respect the game plan. Something's going to have to give. This is a fight. You know, it's a contact sport. I had the same in, I think it was Canada many years ago. Or was it in the US? I think it was Tales Leitis. I'm going to say Tales Leitis versus Alessio Sakara. Boom, right. What about that for a memory? And that was the same, you know. You have to say to, if you're sure and it's clear that one fighter's avoiding, you have it in your jurisdiction to remind them, I need to see you engage. I want to see you engage. And generally you are talking to the fighter who's appears to be on the outside. But like I said, if you by definition are doing the same, you're both to blame. But if one's moving forward, if I see you actively move forward and you're still not engaging, then I can stop the fight and have a word with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Because if you're both just doing the same thing, who am I going to blame? Am I blaming them for not stepping forward or you for not stepping forward? It's going to be clear to me the person who steps forward and then the opponent engages in there, or that person continually avoids. Yeah, there's a clear definition for me to call time and deal with it from a timidity warning.
I was watching a Prince Nassim Hamed fight. I watched a few of them yesterday. I was going through and watching his footwork, and he was fighting this guy, and I can't remember the dude's name, but he was. I mean, the general vibe is that he was like a veteran, like a journeyman that had hung in there over 12 rounds with some decent champions, and you know. Bit worn out, but he was in there to push Naz and see if he could give him a tough test. And he was won twice in the first round for just covering up and taking shots and not throwing anything back.
Yeah.
Like, is there a point?
See, that's not timidity,
right?
Because
that could be tactical. I was just surprised it was in the first round, and then you think back to Rope-a-Dope and Ali on the ropes, like basically biding his time for rounds. What was that? 8, 9, 10 rounds?
That's when you're reliant on the competency of your referee telling the difference between a fighter who's hurt or a fighter who's intentionally allowing a tactic. Now, obviously in boxing, if I'm just standing there, you know, I'm not saying it hasn't happened in MMA, but if the tactic you employ is to wear your opponent down by hitting you, we're not going to get on. Okay, I'll tell you a great.
It's the Homer Simpson tactic.
I'll tell you a great one, and even more extreme. Yet in Cage Warriors, it might have been the night. I don't know, but it was Bigfoot Silver,
right?
And he fought a guy called Ruben Villarreal.
Yeah, Warpath.
Warpath used to wear the what do you call it?
Yeah,
really nice bloke.
Yeah, black leotard and long hair and war paint.
Yeah, really nice bloke.
King of the Cage guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he came to me before the fight. And he said, "Look, ref, I just need to." He said, I just want you to know that part of my tactic is to wear my opponent down. Okay, fantastic. You don't need to divulge your tactic to me. I said, but, you know, thank you, no problem. He goes, but I'll do it in my way. I said, go on. He said, I'm going to let him hit me a lot. And I'm like, yeah, honestly, he goes, if you think I'm wearing him down with my face, he said, basically, don't be alarmed. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Needless to say, he lost by TKO.
Yeah.
You know, and but really nice chap. But I'm like, look,
have you heard some weird? You must have heard some weird stuff in dressing rooms before fights.
I mean, like that's a classic case in point. But I'm talking there like, you look at you try and explain stoppages, TKOs, and you got a guy. The guy's covering up. He's covering up. Okay. I want you to know how it feels. I want you to cover up. Get in turtle position, put your hands over your head, and I'm going to fucking wail on you for as long as I think necessary.
Yeah.
Then tell me how you feel when you're covering up, because you know as well as I do, when you're in a fight, the punches you can't see coming, number one, they're harder. Number two, you're convinced there's more than fucking one person. You think the ref's putting a dig in, right? Because if you can't see it coming, you can't brace, and everything is amplified, right? So I try and explain that to people, and you're trying to say is it's okay to be able to say, "Oh, we'll leave a fighter to take the punishment." Let's say there's 20 strikes undefended or unanswered, and then the 21st gets through the gap and violently KOs the fighter. What do you think they're going to say about me?
Left it too late.
Of course. You know what I mean? And obviously, here's the thing that everything's evolving too, Dan. Everything's getting better. Our understanding and our treatment is getting better. And obviously our education is getting better too. When you look at fighters now, and not, look at CTE, and obviously it was in the news a lot recently from MMA. You look at Spencer Fisher and this, that, and the other. And look, this is fighting, isn't it? You know, and obviously as a paid professional, you know what the risks are. I kind of like use the analogy of saying, like, you know, not saying that everything's handled under the same jurisdiction, but if you're going to be a professional fighter after 15 or 20 years, do you expect yourself cognitively to be the same? Probably not. No. And that's not to say that we don't look at ways of
minimizing that.
Of course, always going to be super contentious, isn't it? And I'm not saying we're going to see a direction or a change in the way that fights are, but maybe we will. I don't know. Look at other sports where even punch to the head is not the aim and objective. Look at it. Look at football, the way they treat football. Now, rugby is an obvious one. Rugby is obviously it's a contact sport. And you look at that. Look, the worst is obviously American football. Because
we learn from those sports that a run up to contact is definitely not good for you.
But obviously, you know, it's education. Because you think, oh, my head's covered, I'm in a helmet. No, that's actually worse, because you would go in, you would throw yourself unabated at human walls and stuff like that.
But then, like, I think back to, you know, going back to the Spencer Fisher, and you know, I was a big fan of Spencer Fisher back in the day, as well as, you know, a lot of the old school fans, just because of his style, the way he fought. But like, in hindsight, Spencer Fisher was a 135er fighting at lightweight because it was the lightest weight class in the UFC. And he was known for having barn burners. Like, his fights were always chaotic and wild. But he was also part of the Miletich team. And they were like they were like America's equivalent to Shootbox.
They had their reputation.
Exactly. So you've got Matt Hughes, welterweight, Robbie Lawler, welterweight, Pat Miletich, middleweight by that time. You know, you've got Rory Markham, who was he was 200 pounds when he arrived in the UK to fight me at welterweight. And then you've got Spencer Fisher on the mat. Like, the nearest guy to his size, I would imagine, that was a decent level was James Pulver. And Pulver was walking around at 170 most of the time. So, like, he was, like, the repetitive punishment in sparring must have been something as well.
Well, this is the thing, and this is why, look, it's incredibly moving and it's incredibly sad when you look at, like, that, like the video and stuff that came out with him and that, you know, but obviously how much of the, you know, obviously fights, you attribute a great deal of that to what's happening in fights. But that's the, you know, when you say to people, that's the reality of fighting. Not necessarily the reality as in it's a foregone conclusion that everybody may end up in the same way, but this is what people need to look past the glitz and the glamour, don't they? And obviously understand. But there's the responsibility that comes with that too. Like everything, like I said, evolution. Look at weight cutting, like the emphasis around weight cutting. Everybody thought it's just a thing that you do. Then they realise, oh, you know what? It's not the right thing to do. Like you said, the thing with Spencer Fisher, we thought like heavy sparring. We thought back in the day, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
If you're not going home every week with a concussion, something's wrong. You had days called heavy sparring days.
Yeah.
Because you knew it was, you know, and effectively, mate, you know yourself, you're fighting your friends. You're not fighting in a malicious way to hurt them, but you're fucking giving it some.
Yeah. And then, you're always doing 5 minutes per round or whatever your round is, because no one's trying to knock each other out full power.
Yeah.
So you're accumulating a larger amount of damage over a period of time in sparring.
You're not trying to knock your friends out.
But you're trying to land with power.
Don't tell me you weren't trying to hit them with power. Of course we were. But it wasn't in a malicious intent. No. You're not fighting, but you damn straight you're letting go.
Yeah.
And they're letting go at you as well.
But then, like, how many fights have you refereed where the fight's been over with maybe three solid punches landed? And that's it. The fight's come to a conclusion and it's done.
Yeah.
There was never a sparring session where I got hit with 3 punches. I always got hit with 200 because we were doing 8-5 sparring. And I was training with Jimmy and...
Minimum.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're getting hit with 200, fuck knows. And then, like I said, with Pele, Chris Cooper and all them guys, Carl Vutt, the guys I was finishing up with, especially when I concentrated on boxing at the end, it's not
Yeah.
But you look at, like, this is what I'm saying about education, evolution. Look at Max Holloway when he was saying about
He's now play sparring, yeah.
don't spar. Robbie Lawler was one of the first ones
Yep.
I heard talk about it, was saying about, and it, because it's evolution. Why people are going, well, it's the thing to do. Well, it's not the thing to do. I put it like this: your longevity as a fighter, or your chin, shall we say, as a fighter. I'm not saying there's people go, oh, he's got a great chin. I don't think there's such a thing. I think that your conditioning and your ability to take shots is governed solely, majorly, by what you would do outside of fights. For the reason we said, I believe that your chin is like a car. It's an irresettable clock. I've said this before. As a fighter, I can get fatter, thinner, heavier, lighter, faster, stronger, all of these things. I can't do nothing about this. I think this is a time lapse, you know.
It's finite. There's a limit to it.
It's something that's on your body. You know, as you get older, you'll slow down. Your athletic prowess will diminish and things like that. I think it's exactly the same with your chin.
Yeah.
You can't condition your chin, you know. And I think it's once you press go on that stopwatch, it elapses. And if you protect that chin, look at Floyd Mayweather, classic case in point. I think I saw that guy got hit maybe twice. The most famous, prominent one for me was Shane Mosley, when he looked half human. And you look at him, he's probably absorbed less punches than anybody, especially at that level. What, 6-weight world champion? And look at how many clean shots he's absorbed.
Yeah.
There's not science behind that. It's just common sense. And I think now, like you said, with evolution, everything's getting better. Education. Look at the money the UFC have put into that study with
yeah, the
CTE.
Cleveland Clinic.
And obviously, as fighters, I knew, like you said, the Spencer Fisher thing, incredibly sad.
Yeah.
But like we said, you know, back in the day, you imagine, like I'm saying, to go back to that mileage, you imagine how much mileage, obviously, he'd put on in fights, of course, but outside of fights too, what we do in the gym.
Honestly, most of the damage that I've got, and I'm very lucky, and I honestly I think this constantly, especially when I look at other fighters and, you know, what they've gone through as far as you know, surgery and recovery and that. I mean, I've never had a major surgery. I mean, I've literally had 5 stitches. Like, I've been very, very lucky. But all mine's like, it's wear and tear, like muscles that are damaged, like and just
Mileage.
You know, yeah, mileage, exactly. But just wear and tear, general wear and tear.
Can you get away from this? Is what I'm saying.
But that almost all of that was from training.
I used the analogy of smoking. I was saying, if I'm going to smoke for 20 years, would I expect my lungs to look the same at the end of it?
No.
And then you're thinking, if I'm going to choose the path of being a professional fighter, you know was risks.
Did you see that close-up shot of Overeem's face from before the weekend? It was just a really strong portrait with really strong lighting. And you kind of, it's weird because, like, I remember, like, I know how Overeem looks. So when I look at Overeem, when I think of Overeem, I fill in a lot of the gaps of his face from memory. Whereas if you actually look at Overeem as he is right now, with the damage to his lip and the nose twisted, like, he's got some scars on his face. And he was a good-looking dude back in the day. I mean, not that, you know, I'm not saying he's unattractive now, Alistair. Please don't be offended. But
get him, Alistair. Look, I mean, look at and obviously it's perpetuated, it's amplified. He's a heavyweight.
Yeah.
He fought at heavyweight.
Exactly.
You can imagine.
Which is what's even funnier about what Warpath said when he was fighting Bigfoot Silver. He's like, oh, yeah, no, just like, that would even make a bit more sense in the lighter weight classes where they're not hitting with.
Let me wear him down with my face. Let me worry about that. But like I was saying, like that and that, people, but everything's getting better. I was saying that smoking analogy, you know, people knowing that if I'm subjecting myself to being hit in the head, of course, I know I need to understand what the risks are, but it's not to say that everything on the outside that we don't do the best we can to, like I said, I think it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like ideology's changing, isn't it? You know, training methods are changing. People are now...
The tough guy element of MMA is starting to give a little bit.
Imagine going back 15 years and going, no, you can't spar for a fight.
Yeah.
They'd think you were fucking mad.
Imagine walking into the gym and saying, I'm not sparring today because I've got a headache from yesterday still.
Yeah, or I'm not sparring to get ready for this fight.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in a striking based, in our game.
I remember so many sparring sessions where if I was my own coach, and that goes back to the question I asked you right near the start, if I was my own coach, there were a lot of sparring sessions I would have stopped me doing. Just not for various reasons, because I'm fatigued, because I'm dehydrated, because I'm hurting from yesterday.
All of those. Do we know if, as a prominent boxer ever came out and said, I haven't sparred for this fight?
My only memory is Calzaghe. I know towards the end of his career, he completely taken sparring out.
That would be a good, because you imagine that. It's like, what do you mean you don't spar?
I'd be interested to know what Chris Eubank, I'd love a conversation with that guy. I find him very interesting.
Senior.
Yeah. I'd love to know what his training was
Give him
like.
on.
Yeah, it's reaching him, innit? And the other one as well, do you remember the other, he was a member of Mensa, as well as being a boxing champion, Michael something. He was like an 80s boxer. I was watching Nazim the other day, and he was one of the pundits on the show. I remember him when it'll come to mind. He was a very, very highly educated boxing world champion, but he was also a member of Mensa. I wonder whether those boxers that were known, like, because Nigel Benn, he's warring every day in the gym, just like he's warring every day in fights. But with Chris Eubank, even the way that he spoke in the fight, in the build up to the Nigel Benn fight, he's like, there was this beautiful moment where he turned to the camera, and he's like, and all you people that have bet on Nigel Benn, you've made a big mistake, because you never bet on a puncher. You always bet on the technician. And I just wonder whether that mentality had permeated his training, or whether he had to offset that with his old school coaching mentality that he must have been around. Like, those guys must have wanted him sparring regularly.
Chris Eubank's probably my favourite British boxer.
Yeah.
All time. I think stylistically, he's one of the best we've ever produced. When you watch his ring craft,
amazing.
He used to go from, he would be
just his presence as
very
well,
wide. Yeah, his whole persona and all that. But you watch his actual boxing ability, in particular his footwork. He was very wide, wider than a lot more boxers. He could probably go from corner to corner in like 3 pivots.
Yeah.
His stylistically, for me, that was the golden era. That super middleweight era with him. Obviously, Calzaghe a little bit later, but Ben, obviously the tragedy with Michael Watson what happened, but Collins, all that era of boxing when it was live accessible on TV in the UK.
Yeah. I used to watch it all the time. I loved it.
Unbelievable.
Collins used to come out crying, didn't he, in tears, headphones in. He was like getting himself in a really Nigel Benn always he was always the guy in the gym that of all the tough guys, he excelled. He was the toughest of the tough guys.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anything. I appreciate that. I love watching him. And as far as like just sitting back and watching a fight, he's the kind of guy that you want on TV.
Everybody loved Ben.
But to learn from, as a student of the game, as a student of martial arts, Chris Eubank was the guy.
Technically, yeah. It was kind of like, obviously, Nigel Benn was a world-class boxer. But it was that when it was him and him, it was like the boxer brought, they always say like the fighter versus the boxer kind of thing. And obviously very much Eubank was the boxer, but technically, I mean, and that was a genuine, that's what you call a beef.
Oh man. But how invested was Chris Eubank though? Because I mean, you remember it live. I watched a lot of it in retrospect. Like, he was playing a game. He was toying with Nigel Benn. You know what I mean? It was like he wasn't nearly as emotionally invested as Nigel Benn was. But
it's different characters, isn't it?
Yeah.
Put it this way, it's like Chris Eubank knew how much Nigel Benn hated him and loved it.
Yeah.
Because he would take that and use that to his advantage.
It's hilarious.
You've done it too.
Yeah, I love it.
I know what fight you done it with. You done it with Marcus Davis. It's mental warfare.
Yeah.
It's mental warfare. And Chris Eubank did, he was just such a break. He was so different. Obviously people would relate to the way in which he spoke, you know what I mean? And he was just so different.
What about Naseem? Did you enjoy his style?
Oh, come on, man. Who didn't enjoy Naseem?
Yeah. I went back and watched a bunch of his fights yesterday. he commanded the space so well and played the game so well.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was he was fighting, but he took 12 minutes to get to the ring.
Yeah.
And by the time he was
On the
halfway,
magic carpet, the flying carpet.
And the bloke was standing on the corner. He was like yelling at him, "Come on, like get to the brilliant."
Situate, that's you're one round up already. Do you know what I mean? And he was, I mean, obviously from
his fight against that Welsh fella. He fought a Welsh world champion down in Cardiff, and the whole crowd were against him, and the guy couldn't even touch him. He was fantastic, wasn't he?
But he would eat it up. And you imagine, like, obviously his stuff, because a lot of purists were always like, because of that saying the Brendan Ingle style, you know, when his hands were down, or people not realising, yes, there was the flashy element to it, but also how much it aided your head movement. When I've got my hands up, my angle of movement from a hips point of view is quite restricted.
Yeah.
And my hands are down. I can go wide step, pivot, switches. My head would lean back and he was like, he took it to another dimension. You know what I mean? A lot of people were thinking it was just some erratic, crazy, because he was coming in and countering with punches from all kinds of angles and jumping up in the air and landing punches when his feet, because a lot of referees would warn him, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Because he's landing punches when his feet
he's
are
in
off
the
the
air.
ground and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But he was like, I mean,
Imagine they brought that rule into MMA.
you can't punch if your feet are off the ground. Yeah. There's not. I think that the most obvious example of that today is Pereira. He's probably the most flamboyant in that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The most airborne.
The most, spends more time. Most time in the air. It'd be a new statistic, wouldn't
We
it?
do, yeah.
It's that most airborne time.
Airborne.
Yeah, but he was. I'm trying to think of who from MMA. We should know this.
Crazy Horse was always one that used to lunge and
Well, that was
like
fucking,
wing at people.
That was just bizarre.
Yeah.
Jumping up on the cage.
Do you remember when he sat on the corner post of the ring in Pride?
And then when he's just like, when the cameras come out and he's turning to the camera, but he was an athletic specimen.
Oh,
mate.
he was, yeah.
Just like
he was.
You're talking about the unpredictable. Obviously, a lot of power. He was a bit like a Nazim because he would just throw punches from his ankles.
Yeah.
He would go
Made
down
out of rubber as well, wasn't he? He was just
go down at weird movements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crazy Horse Bennett.
Yeah.
You remember the fight he had with when he was in who was it? It was the jiu-jitsu coach of Shooter Box at the time. Was it Christian? Remember?
Yes, I do.
He choked him out cold.
Yeah.
And
Was
you
it
see-
Azeredo?
No, it wasn't Azeredo.
No.
It was he'd fought in the UFC too.
I know what you
And
mean.
you see Vanderlei and all them like holding, and they're all cornering him in Portuguese because he sat there on his own and he's watching TV. I think he was in like a locker or a green room, and they've come in and something's kicked off. And
Yeah.
you know what? Fair play, because there was a proper straightener. We weren't jumping on him in a gang. It was a one-on-one fight, and when he was out, it had ended.
It was done.
But
yeah.
I think it was Marcelo, something. I can't remember the full name. But yeah, he triangled him and put him out.
Yeah.
Put him out cold. But you hear like Vanderlei and them all in Portuguese, like cornering. It was, but fair play. There was no cheap shots, no this, no that. It was man on man, and it was like a proper straightener.
Yeah.
And
Did you follow Pride when it was happening back in the day? Were you waiting for the next event and the next event? Yeah.
Who didn't love Pride?
Oh, man.
Come on.
I wanted to fight in Pride so bad.
Pride was, but obviously I think, we're talking about evolution and stuff like that. Like I'm saying we're talking about CT and stuff like that. That's what we're saying. We're getting better to minimise the aesthetic values of sport. Look, Pride was phenomenal, amazing history, and we were glued to some of the most seminal moments and the legends of the sport had born. Vanderlei, a perfect example, with Crocop, Big Nog, Sakuraba, all of the freak fights that they had, but proper freak fights, because it was the little guy was always the skilled guy versus the sumos and stuff like that. Pride was incredible. It'd give you goosebumps. I don't want to see somebody stamping on another man's face.
No.
Don't stamp on it and pass it off as MMA.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And one of the main reasons why I agree with you is because it almost always happens when the person has already been dropped. It's as you were talking about earlier.
On your fucking head when you're standing, am I? Fully aware of your surroundings.
I mean, the thing is, I would fight under those rules. It won't bother me to fight under them. But from an ambassador of MMA perspective.
What now?
Yeah.
You would take a fight with Pride rules?
I would, yeah. But the thing, but that's me talking as a fighter. That's me talking as a fighter. As an ambassador for MMA, I would say no. I wouldn't mind knees to the head on the ground though. That wouldn't bother me.
No, Dan. No.
Why not?
I'll tell you why not.
Go on.
Okay. So let's say me and you are different way. Let's say you're fighting, okay?
Yeah.
And we'll get you on the ground up against the cage, and your head is wedged right in with a post at the back.
Okay.
So there's nowhere for your head to go. And then I put my palm in your head, and I can pendulum myself, weight up, and come down with that knee straight to your skull.
Okay then.
Sound like a good idea?
No, it doesn't.
And I know what you're going to say. Calm down in the fucking comments, everyone. I could be punched in the head and need it for 25. It's a different thing.
Yeah,
and it's
I agree.
Aesthetic.
I agree.
Dan, look.
But let me just. I'm applying that rule, the pride rules, in a ring though in my head.
Yeah.
Which so you don't get put in those same kind of situations.
But the scenario I've just given to you, does it make you think different?
That does, yeah.
Would you want Brock fucking Lesnar in that same scenario when your head's got nowhere to go? And he can freely knee you in the head.
It was bad enough watching Alistair Overeem.
Is it a good
Frank
idea?
Mir. No, yeah, no.
Or Shogun stood out. I can't remember who it was.
In a cage, I agree with you.
Stood over with it stamping it. Listen, there's no martial art about that. Okay?
So knees to the head in rings only then?
No, I don't want knees to the head. We're talking
Would you not referee a Pride Rules match?
Nope.
No.
I've been asked to before.
Have you?
Nope.
Yeah. So would you? So you're doing karate combat though, aren't you? Coming up.
I am. Yeah.
Talk to me about that because I'm interested in it.
I'm really excited about that.
I really enjoyed what I've seen of it so far.
I spoke to the
What
guys.
are the rules?
Sorry.
Sorry to cut you off. What are the rules first? 'Cause
I mean, I'm not. There's limited. It's not like there's a time limitation when it goes to the ground as well.
Right.
It's not MMA. They're obviously taking it in a different dimension. But I'm not letting you off the hook here with knees to the head. So don't try and fucking gloss over that. You've tried to push that into the side.
As an MMA ambassador, I agree with you. Knees to the head in a ring or a cage are not good. But if I was offered a fight in Pride, under Pride rules in the ring, I would
the original Pride rules, soccer kicks and all
of it. I would still do it. But that's the fighter in me, and that's pride, and I have a romanticism to those rules because
I get it, and I fantasize and romanticize with pride and all of these things.
Yeah,
but we're talking about evolution, and like I said,
See, I didn't like Pride because they didn't have elbows. That was the issue for me.
You know why they didn't have elbows?
Because they made a mess of fights and he was stopped too soon.
Correct, because it would superficially stop a fight too soon. No, you're not. I'll tell you a funny story about this in a minute. But kind of a similar way, and I've lost the plot at a rules meeting. Believe it or not. But Pride are saying, no elbows to the head. We don't want the fight stopped prematurely. Look, it's Japan. Look, Pride was magnificent. All of the things, all the superlatives. I loved it. This, that, and the other. But we're just talking. We're talking about the Spencer Fisher, about education, about minimising, getting better, etc., etc. I'm not saying they're going to get to the point where combat sports are going to be banned, but it's education and making things safer. Anyway, I'll tell you a story. One of my fighters back in the day when I was still coaching was Dave Hill, and he'd on the ascendancy. David actually fought Conor McGregor. He lost in the world championship fight in Cage Warriors, and Dave was phenomenal. Really good kid, very intelligent, good job, very well spoken, great student, loved everything and done what he did very well. And we took a fight on his not long before the Conor fight. He was fighting a guy called Tom Ninamaki.
Oh, I remember Ninamaki. Hell of a grappler.
Yeah, stone face.
He was a UFC vet, wasn't he?
Yeah, he went to UFC but been around forever. Phenomenal Finnish guy. And we fought in his backyard. And we'd done all the things, and we'd said about I can see how we could beat him. Dave was submitting everybody left, right, and centre, and Tom beat him up. He broke his nose early, and he would class act. Tom went the distance. Dave was never out of the fight, but he got beat up pretty bad. Anyway, at the rules meeting, we go in the rules meeting, and it's they're talking about I'm there like a dad with his boy. It's like Finnish MMA was the talking about, no, blah, 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 blah. Don't do this, don't do that. No foot stomps. I'm like, what? He said, no standing foot stomps. We don't allow them. I'm like, okay, yeah, no biggie, you're not going to win a fight by, or stop a fighter by stomping on his foot. And so it goes, but stomps to the body are allowed. Stop. What? Say that again. So he said, yes, there's no, in a standing clinch, there's no standing foot stomps. But if a fighter is grounded as well as kicking to the body, so I can stamp and stomp to the body. So I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Dave's there and he's like, Marc, Dad, just leave it. And I remember, I said, are you fucking kidding me? And he's gone, well, I said, look, I'm not having this. I said, you told me unified rules. I said, and I don't mind having an anomaly, but I can't listen to this bullshit here. I can't have you telling me that a standing foot stomp is banned because you said it's too dangerous. But if I'm lying on
Is that the reason they gave you?
Yes! And then he said, but if I'm lying on my back, I can jump in the air, cartwheel, and two-footed stomp on my fighter's chest. Yes. Fucking no. Anyway, but we had, and we got back to unified rules, and I'd kind of helped them see the error of their way, shall we say.
Right. Do you remember when Cage Rage brought in that rule, where the ref, like if a fighter was grounded for a period of time, the referee could put their hand up. Yeah. And
open guard. Head kicks were allowed. Yeah, you had to be 1 meter away from the cage, and the referee they were using the black marker as the line. One of the best examples I saw of it, I think, was Brad Pickett. Brad Pickett did it against Ozzy Hallock. Ozzy was old time guy, good guy, been round on the grapple and strike circuit way back in the day. I remember Brad jumping up in the air.
I remember a photo of that. I rember there's an iconic photo of him in the air.
Excuse me, and stomping on him. It was allowed back then.
Yeah.
But the whole head, like I said, it's evolution. We're trying to make the sport safer, and of course the excitement and the people used to get over watching Pride, this, that, and the other. But
how would the karate combat arena work for MMA, do you think? It looks like an interesting arena.
I mean, obviously, I haven't been there yet.
This is your first show that you're going to be working on.
I'm excited to be over there and see it. And
let's try and get out.
The way they do it is that they do it like a green screen.
Right.
So they can superimpose various scenarios and backdrops in, and afterwards, I'm really excited.
So you've got an arena and a small crowd, but it's like a pit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like a raised area, but it's not like the Yama.
Yeah,
not like the Yama pit fight.
It is padded though, isn't it? Slightly sloped and padded.
It's padded on the side, yeah. But I'm looking forward because it's just it's a new format, and I was talking to I'm very particular, should we say? I had a look at it and this, that, and the other. But I'm excited by that, and the guys seem great, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and checking out the new format and seeing what we can do to helping each other. And I'm excited.
Yeah,
and I've never been to, of all the countries in Europe I've never been to Budapest before.
It's supposed to be beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not sure what it's going to be like right now.
Yeah,
and how much I can get out and have a look. But
yeah, I bet work's dropped off quite a bit, hasn't it? I mean, you've been doing Fight Islands and stuff.
Oh God, but for me, yeah, it's been. Yeah. I mean, last year, like I said, a lot of people have been in a much worse scenario or a bigger predicament, and I'm always thankful for what you've got, not crying after what you haven't got. But yeah, at the start of the pandemic, we'd done New Zealand, and then we came home and it just, the tap got turned off. And then I hadn't been out for about 5 months. The first time we'd been out was the first Fight Island. So yeah, in 2020 I probably lost 70% easy, 70% down on work, but I was still traveling to and from Vegas. I should be back in Vegas in a couple of weeks for the next pay-per-view too. So I'm thankful for that. I really am thankful, and obviously the work I do with IMAF and stuff keeps things ticking over.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about. Well, let's go on to that now. We can talk about the EMMA, English Mixed Martial Arts Association. Not a person called Emma.
Yes, not a person.
Not a person called Emma.
I've just about got away with it now. Now she believes that it's a thing, not a person.
So, well, this is something we've been working on for a little while now, isn't it? And we've been having conference calls with the whole crew. And where do you want to start with it? Because the most important thing is people know what we're doing. and people know that we're here. I mean, this is specifically for English MMA gyms and competitors.
Yeah, I mean, it's education, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, the sport of MMA. The most fundamental thing that people should understand who are outside the sport is that we are unrecognised in terms of governmental support or stature. So we are unregulated by that definition. We've been reliant on good people doing the right thing and at the right time in the right places. Classic case in point is, from the UK would be Cage Warriors. From a professional standpoint, towed the line, go above and beyond fighters' safety, all the things that they don't have to do because there's no one regulating them. That's the first thing. Obviously, from a developmental point of view, this is where EMMA came in, English Mixed Martial Arts Association, solely to concentrate on the development, because we know that MMA is like an upside down pyramid right now. The sport's there at the top, and then underpinning it is in this country, it's a fragile, shaky thing because there's no jurisdiction, because we don't have to do it. So we're trying to put the right pillars and blocks and foundation in now. And obviously the English Federation, we put a call to arms out, didn't we?
Yeah.
The people involved with the board, myself, yourself, Leon Roberts, Paul Sutherland, Nick Pete, Rosie Sexton,
Paul
Reed, Martin Shotbolt, Dr. Ali, Molly McCann. So the representation there, from different facets in areas of the sport, from medical point of view, from a fighter's point of view, Molly and yourself, arguably still from an official's point of view, me and Leon from a regulatory point of view, me and Leon from a coach's point of view, Paul Sutherland.
I mean, it kind of touches on what we were what we were talking about a minute ago with the pandemic, and after the New Zealand show, we had the Brasilia show, which we were discussing, and then the London event, which we were going to be present at as Emma.
There was a massive springboard for us there.
And then obviously with the pandemic that stopped it. But the thing is, so when the UFC come over to the UK, they self-regulate.
Yeah.
And that's not ideal, because that gives us no protection outside of when the UFC are here. Basically, if somebody wants to put a show on, there's nobody that can regulate that show to make sure it's safe and meeting all the requirements to protect the fighters. If the UFC go to somewhere like Sweden, they have their own regulatory body, which is basically kind of what we need, which is kind of what we are, what we've needed for a long time. And I mean, from a fighter perspective, knowing, and you'll know this as well from your time and experience, like, we've been very lucky that we've had a few good people in the sport that have held the integrity together, and we've been lucky with the people that have dropped in the sport and made a bit of cash and bounced, because they could have really negatively impacted when we were fortunate that they didn't. But now with the English Mixed Martial Arts Association, we're trying to move that forward a bit more, and bring some unity to the country and to the sport at grassroots. Exactly
that, and we know all the pitfalls. Hopefully, you people, who Dan is, who I am, and you can trust in the fact that like I'm talking to the people now. We put that call to arms out, didn't we? Saying that, we're trying to unite and get people together. Enough's enough. We know that there's nothing to stop us trying to put the right things in. We put that campaign out before, even going to the EnglishMMA.org website and the Twitter page and the Instagram page, when we're asking for gyms to sign up. We know gyms are, to say they're up against it right now is a understatement.
Yeah.
We're not asking for any money, not asking for a penny. No. We want to be able just to unite people, and like I said, this is where the IMAF comes in, and the importance of us. Like I said, that inverted pyramid, we're structuring the sport from the ground up at all levels, coaches education, athlete certification, and I know people will have their own ideals and opinions on it, but when we talk about certification and grading syllabuses, it's not about a body of people coming in and telling you you're doing this wrong and show me how to do an arm bar and this, that. It's just about putting a foundation in for hopefully getting this sport recognised at a later date, because coming with recognition is fundamentally, first and foremost, is some government assistance, funding. And with funding, we can bring in more people and ensure tighter safety measures. Unfortunately, in the UK, as you know, combat sports, there's two sides of it. You have a regulated side and an unregulated side. And that's just the way that the jurisdiction and the law is in the UK. In other countries, they don't have that problem, shall I say. There is a lot of antiquated, jurisdiction and whatnot out there. And obviously MMA being a newer sport, we're kind of, like I said, everything's still formative. Do not lose sight of the track. Do not lose sight of the fact that this is still a young sport, but there's good people, and we are, this is all for the love. This is not a paid entity. No. It's not a paid role. People involved in this, we know it's a slow burn. We know it's a slow process, but it's almost like we're appealing to people to come together, register your interest via the EnglishMMA.org website or via the social channels, and come together and help us bring the sport on.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're out there, if you've got a gym in England, or if you're a fighter in England, follow the Instagram, get on the website and register, and let us know you're out there and you want to be a part of this. And let's just, especially when everyone's got a bit of downtime, gyms are closed and stuff. When things start picking back up, we can have a big impact here. The UFC are already on board. We're going to get other promoters on board as well, and really establish what the English Mixed Martial Arts Association is all about. But in the long run, helping with things like insurance and, making sure that there aren't any people out there setting up gyms that don't know what they're talking about, and, protecting people in the sport and the fighters when they're competing.
Two very good points you made there. One was, obviously, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. So we need the voice of the people out there too. Like you said, what do we give back? Insurance, that's a classic one. It's not about who's not insured or doing something uninsured. We know out there that there is various levels of insurance, but for mixed martial arts and the definition for insurers, it's a very hard thing to come by.
We were doing really well with the insurance for Hardy Wallad MMA, and then it just so happened that we mentioned that we've got a cage, and immediately the whole insurance thing changed.
It just changes, doesn't it? Change the dot. And there you go from obviously a seasoned vet in the game, a respected person in the game, but also somebody who's a current gym owner, and And the second one, the important point you were saying there is obviously it's the people within the sport who have been around. We know a lot of people who've been around for a long time that the general public don't know, but we know the solid, fundamental, hardcore people, men and women and man and boy who have grown up with this sport. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that deserve some form of, recognition, validation, protection, because if something does catastrophically go wrong with this sport, I want to be able to sort the wheat from the chaff, so that government do know that good people are trying to do good things, and we know that bad practice will always go on until such times. We don't want them to come in and drop the hammer and say, right, that's it, MMA is now gone. Then what? 20 years of my life down the drain until we get it back. We want to be proactive and try and stop that and say, look, just like boxing. Boxing is, it's a licensed sport. It's a governed sport. It's a recognised sport, obviously from Olympic standard, from a professional standard. But there's also a huge scene of unlicensed boxing out there. But the British Boxing Board of Control and the GB Boxing can draw a line and ring fence their people.
They're not going to get put into the same group if something happens untoward. Yeah,
and that's what we want.
Yeah, the thing is that when we were coming through, there were no clear paths in any direction. You didn't know, there was no Ultimate Fighter, so you could get into the UFC that way. There were no amateur tournaments, especially not international ones. You'd find the occasional kind of mixed rules tournament, KSBO, as we were talking about a little while ago, no headshots and stuff. But there was no clear path, so everyone was kind of clearing their own path. Now there are several clear routes, which means that the traffic going through those routes is going to be much greater. There are a lot of younger fighters, younger athletes, younger kids wanting to get into MMA and to start with MMA. and we need something in place to help those paths and to redefine those paths to make sure they're protected on all sides. That's what it is in my head. Like it's the younger athletes that are getting into mixed martial arts with the idea of doing amateur and then semi-pro and then pro, and knowing all the way along that there's a governing body.
No semi-pro.
Oh no, of course, no. I mean, but the thing is, the thing is, everybody that gets to pro though, they should be going through these channels. 100%. You know what I mean? It's the safest and most intelligent way of doing it. Like if you're an IMAF champ, you're stepping into the pro ranks already knowing that you've gone through all the tests, you've already been protected all the way through as far as like medically, you've been tested, you've been competing in regulated events that have been respected and recognized by the UFC and all the other organizations around. So although I know English Mixed Martial Arts Association is, up to amateur and everybody underneath that, everybody pro and wherever you go, you're going to come through this organization in some way. And it's going to serve a purpose, so everyone needs to be involved in it. That's just the way I see it.
I couldn't agree more. It's about ring fencing.
Yeah,
especially in the UK, where it's not like in France where MMA was banned and they managed to put all their pyramid starting in the right way.
Yeah, they had to start with the foundation
exactly.
and build it wide, and then build
slowly
on it.
But surely they'll open the door and things will start coming in. You said yourself, they're obviously the amateurs. IMAF, and again, I work closely with IMAF, and for good reason, because it's building the sport from the ground up. And you look at like imaf.org, go and educate yourself, have a look at what they do. The ground we've covered in the last 5 or 6 years has been, honestly, I can't, and I don't lend my name to anything. You know what I mean? I'll do it, obviously, in the right way.
Yeah.
But like the pandemic, it was like a dagger, to say, I mean, look, any pandemic, and like we said, there's people who have lost businesses and lives and all kinds of things without being, selfishly speaking, it's got in the way of everybody's life. Mm. But the momentum that IMAF was building, particularly in the last World Championships, 2019 World Championships, there was over 500 athletes, over 50 countries. There was 4 cages. It was a week-long event.
Amazing. I watched it through the Raptors. They were there covering it all, and they came back saying it was one of the best things they've ever experienced. And they've been to some of the biggest UFC events now. It's a special thing, and it's something I wish was there in place when I was coming through. It would have helped me understand the game of MMA and how to compete properly instead of just trying to clear my own path through the nonsense.
That's what we did, isn't it?
Yeah,
because the vehicle wasn't there.
Mm.
And look at amateur Olympic. Look at boxing, for instance. An amateur boxer, you're looking at records into the hundreds of fights. In MMA, obviously, it's going to be some time before we get to that kind of level. But I think even in MMA now, anything classed as 20 or 20 plus amateur fights, you're considered like, wow, super experienced, when it should be 100 plus. But obviously things slowly but surely over the years it'll evolve and get up to that.
Mm. Well, that was the other problem as well, was finding competition back in the day.
This wasn't there.
Especially for you as a heavyweight, it must have been difficult.
Amateur, heavyweight? No, fuck that. Get in with this guy.
Yeah, right.
He's wrestled a bit, don't worry about it.
That's it.
He's a Russian.
You're ready to turn pro. You're ready to turn pro, definitely.
And like we said, just the foundations are being built, and this is a serious, it is a serious plea for us to just put out there and look at the work that IMAF has put in, and then there's that definitive path, so that when we can finally shut up in 10, 20 years' time, people think, what were they talking about? The pathway's there.
Yeah.
Amateur longevity, and then you've got that middle ground. You've got the amateur longevity. Then you get into, like a Cage Warriors, then you've got the high-level domestic and European shows for people to cut their teeth as a professional before they go to the UFCs or the Bellators or the PFLs or the One Championship. It's that definitive pathway, education and pathway. It's so important.
Yeah, and the bit that's never been there is the protection for the amateurs and the structure and the foundation for the amateurs. Like, I went straight into pro. a lot of people around my generation, your generation, they went straight into pro.
We had nothing
because there
else.
was nothing else. If you wanted to fight MMA, you were a pro, and you were getting fuel money to show up to the event. So in summary, if you're a young MMA fighter, if you're interested in competing at some point, or you just like taking part in the sport, if you've got a gym in England, get on the EnglishMMA.org website, follow us on Instagram, and just kind of keep in touch with what we're doing, because there's going to be lots of ways for everybody to get involved and come together for the sport and benefit from one another.
Well said, Dan Hardy, and I couldn't agree more. Join us and help us, and we can shape this. It's not a cliche, but it's a two-way thing, and we can shape this sport together for sure.
Awesome. Seems like a good place to stop it. Nice one.
Thanks, buddy.